Okay, I think we're good to go here. Just want to double check. You guys should be hearing my audio. Okay, there it is. Okay. Pull this full screen here so I can see the chat. Okay. So we should be in business here. Keyword should. should be in business here. All right. I think we're good to go. I just wanted to double check and be sure. Let me just jump over here and double check as well. All right. What's going on, everyone? My name is Meteorologist Mike Linden. I am a member of the My Radar meteorological team. Our chief meteorologist, Leslie Hudson, has been working incredibly hard to bring you the latest and greatest on Hurricane Dorian, but she needs some time to get some rest, especially considering how jam-packed the next couple of days are going to be. So you are here with me this morning. So it is 8 a.m., at least at the time you are seeing this. Right now, it is 8 a.m., we have a brand new batch of updates to bring to you from the National Hurricane Center, which does include some new information about Hurricane Dorian. What I figured we would do this morning is advance through and take a look at some of these graphics, so that way I can break down the potential path, the intensity, and what you can expect as a whole for Dorian. So let's jump right in here. Let's do it. All right. Oop. All right. So there is Hurricane Dorian, and as a whole, it's still a very powerful storm. It is a Category 4 storm with wind speeds now estimated to be sustained at around 145 miles per hour. That's in the latest information from the National Hurricane Center. We'll get another path update from them at 11 o'clock this morning, but we are still not there just yet. A couple things to point out about Dorian. Notice that the eye is kind of up here in the northwestern corner of the hurricane. Not exactly what you want to see when you are looking for a really strong kind of top-end storm. You kind of want that eye a little more symmetrical. So it's still a rather asymmetric storm. You can see this half is still like a lot fatter. You can see the convection and the overcast convection billowing out this way toward the east and northeast, and that's really dominating the overall shape of Dorian. I do expect things to get a little more even as it gets closer to the coastline and as it slows down, but it's still really important to not overlook that this is a very powerful storm even as it stands right now. Needless to say, the eye is very well defined. This has definitely been a new development over the past couple of days. We have really seen that eye really begin to pop out on infrared imagery. And that is exactly what you want to see if you are looking for an incredibly strong storm. You need a well-defined eye. There's a lot of things that can happen with the eye of a hurricane as it reaches its really mature stage, as we are seeing right now. Without really boring you guys, but hey, it is a live stream, so I have no one in my ear telling me to wrap things up. There is a process called eye wall replacement, where essentially what will happen is within the storm, being that it is going so fast, it's such a powerful, such an intense storm that it even starts to lose like control a little bit. I'm sure if you've ever been driving really fast, when you start to go really high rates of speed, it almost feels like everything's gonna like break down on you. It's kind of what's happening at a really, really, really large scale, where essentially what will happen here is that the eye will be replaced by another eye, considering that the rate of convection is just so intense within the storm. So that is certainly something to watch out for. That would cause for a big weakening in this overall storm, but that's just not the case as at least right now. It's just something to keep in mind here moving forward. But over the past 24 hours, we have really seen a lot of development out of Dorian, going from a category 1 to 2 to 3 and now to a 4 with wind speeds at $145. That's nothing to turn your nose up at. That is a very, very powerful storm. And as you can see now, really beginning to start to see it off the eastern coastline of Florida and for the Bahamas as a whole and Andros Island. So we are dealing with a pair of watches and warnings. Let me pull up my pointer again so we can take a look. You have this pinkish color here for Andros Island. This is a hurricane watch, whereas this red color here for most of the Bahamas, at least the northwestern Bahamas, that is a hurricane warning. The difference between a watch and a warning: a watch, if you think about it like baking, a watch means that you have all of your ingredients in bowls. It's all ready to go. A warning means that the cake is baked. The cake is almost ready to be sliced and eaten. So one is a lot more imminent, and that is a hurricane warning. You can apply that to tornado, flash flood, a watch, and a warning. So now let's take a look at the latest path from the NHC. This is what I'm sure that you are here for. A Category 4 storm and is expected to remain a Category 4 storm all the way into and throughout this weekend, potentially sitting right off the coastline of eastern Florida by Monday morning, very early at about 2 a.m., still packing some very strong winds at that point. But notice that the latest path here from the NHC is it goes along with what we were seeing several days ago as the models continue to come into some kind of agreement. Speaking of the models, I'm sure you've heard a lot about the GFS. I'm sure you've heard a lot about the European. You're going to hear a lot about those models here in the coming days. Those are kind of the tip of the spear when it comes to model guidance for meteorologists. But there's an important word in all of that to not overlook, and that is the word guidance. That's what these models are. They are not the gospel. They are not a fact. It is simply model guidance, meaning that for meteorologists and for people that know how to look at these models and use them as a tool, in the same way where you may understand math, but you can use a calculator as a tool to help you understand it more. The same thing goes with model guidance and with forecasting. You need model guidance in order to give you the best possible forecast that you can give. So it's important to remember that with these models, they're all going to look at different parameters. They're all going to show different things, but it's important to look at the trend with those models. And what we have continued to see with these model trends is that, especially with the National Hurricane Center exact path and with those models, you're starting to see things trend a little more northward. And coincidentally, this is what we were seeing about a week ago in some high-range models, or long-range models, I should say. We were seeing this northward turn. But remember, you don't necessarily want to be looking at this red line, the National Hurricane Center path. That is kind of a best estimate. What you want to be looking for and what you want to prepare for is this white cone. That is the cone of uncertainty, as it is called. And that means that anywhere within this range is still in play. So even though this red line is off the coastline, that means Cape Canaveral, Orlando, Tampa, Jacksonville, Tallahassee, all of these areas are still in play. You can see that the Florida Keys now, not to say that they are ruled out, but it would take a lot for this storm to just completely buck this trend and come down here to the southwest. So could be some early indications from the National Hurricane Center that they believe that the turn is going to kind of get going a little earlier than anticipated, but that's going to be the That's really going to be the big turning point, pun intended, for when we start to see this thing turning. And that should be over this weekend. And that is something that I know that our chief, Leslie Hudson, is really paying a very close mind to, being that she has a lot of experience with tropical forecasting and was one of the local meteorologists, at least in the city of Orlando, to be able to nail down the path of Hurricane Charlie. Now, looking at the GFS model wind gusts, just because you could potentially miss out on a landfall from Hurricane Dorian, that does not mean that you're going to miss out on hurricane force winds. In fact, you're very likely going to be dealing with hurricane force winds if you live along the eastern coast of Florida, from Miami all the way northward. Look at that. By Tuesday evening, 8:45, Fort Pierce, as well as the Cape Canaveral area and the Melbourne area of Brevard County, all dealing with the potential for some very strong wind gusts. Let's also keep in mind that storm surge also going to be a huge factor in all of this. And in fact, the key messaging from the National Hurricane Center all along has been that this event is likely to produce life-threatening storm surge. Those are not words to be throwing around very lightly. Life-threatening storm surge. Also, a big shout-out to NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns. He put out a really interesting tweet that has continued to stick in the back of my mind. Yesterday, that being Friday, was a new moon. That means that tides are going to be very high through this Labor Day weekend, and that means the only going to make that potential inundation from storm surge that much worse. So it's certainly something to keep in mind if you live in a coastal community. And if, by the way, if official updates are coming from local, state, federal authorities to evacuate, you need to heed those. Do not be the person that is putting yourself at risk to need to be rescued, because then you are just putting emergency officials at risk themselves, and they are going to be very busy over this weekend. So do not be that person that goes, whatever, I'm okay, I'll be fine here, my house is built up to code, even though you're in an evacuation zone. So that is certainly something to pay very close attention to in the next couple of days. Now, bear in mind that notice this model up into Wednesday and even into Thursday takes this thing all the way up the southeastern coastline. Jacksonville, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. At this point, according to the NHC, the storm could still be rather strong. Maybe not a major hurricane at Category 3 and above, but potentially still up near a Category 2. It's really key to remember, really key to remember that with these storms, they want to be over water. More than anything else, these storms want to be over warm water. That's how they grow. That's how they get nice and strong. That's how they remain intense. These are heat engines here, right? I mean, it's not simply just a top that you spin. This is a huge, large-scale feature. So they want to stay over water. They want to stay nice and big. I mean, they're big features. They want to stay over the warm water, and that is could be our saving grace here in the next couple of days. The precipitation forecast continues to also be something to pay very close attention to, especially for those that live in the state of Florida, at least right now. If this thing were to turn northward and head toward Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, the flood threat is also going to continue to be, again, those words, life-threatening from the National Hurricane Center. But this is something that the models continue to show a lot of variation on. Just a couple of days ago, we were seeing upwards of a foot of rain, even in the city of Orlando from this model. So that is very important to keep in mind here. Just a little shift off the coastline here, and we could see a huge change to the amount of rain that we see in Florida. Eerily enough, this is a very similar path to what Hurricane Matthew took a couple of years ago, just narrowly missing a historic landfall in Brevard County, just 5 to 10 miles off the coastline. It really is amazing. Also very amazing that was not that very long ago. It had that made landfall, that would have been 4 major hurricanes in 4 years making landfall in Florida. But of course, Matthew did not make landfall in 2016, but Irma, 2017, Michael, 2018, and now potentially Dorian in 2019. That would make it the 3rd major hurricane in as many years to make landfall in the state of Florida. Wild Wild stuff, folks. So before I say goodbye here, we're going to look at two of the again, benchmark model runs, the GFS and the European. And if you've ever played Mario Kart on Nintendo 64, or you ever play a video game where you're doing a time trial, you typically have that like ghost of your all-time high score kind of following you around. That's what we're doing with the European here. So you've got the GFS up to the north, European down here to the south. And interestingly enough, by Tuesday evening, the GFS and the Euro both getting on board with this thing staying off the coast, which is amazing. That really is wild to see, considering that these models and the official path were very different even just 12 hours ago. So it's certainly something to not forget here as we continue to move forward closer to Labor Day Monday. So watch as the European and the GFS head northward and begin to turn off or turn out to sea. Still puts things real close to the coastline there. I mean, very, very similar to what Hurricane Matthew did just a couple of years ago. Very, 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 very similar path. This would still result in major, major storm surge, wind, and flooding for those areas affected by it. But let's jump and let's take a look here at this graphic before I say goodbye. This is a really, really important one on top of everything that we have talked about today. It is August 31st. That is the day right now. And we are about to head into the peak of hurricane season. I mean, it's amazing to think. If only it were one storm and we could be done. Unfortunately, that's just not the case. Hurricane season is just now entering its peak, where we are very likely to get even more named storms, whether or not they threaten impact to the United States or whether or not they are even named in the first place. That still remains to be seen. The technology is just not there yet where we are able to nail down that long range of an event and to be able to tell you exactly when and where it's going to make impact and how. So again, if you live in any of these coastal communities, if you are in the cone of uncertainty, you need to have a hurricane plan in place. You need to be sure that you, your family, your pets, your loved ones, your neighbors, that you are all safe, that you are all prepared for a potential landfall. I'm reporting from Orlando, Florida. That is where we are. But again, this is a very serious event, so it needs to be taken so. And we are going to continue to monitor it as the situation continues to unfold. If you are, again, watching here on the YouTube channel, be sure to subscribe. Click on that notification bell. That way you always know whenever we drop a new video, as we will have you covered. All things Hurricane Dorian through the weekend and into next week, whether it's myself, whether it's meteorologist Stephanie Lauber, or if it's Chief Meteorologist Leslie Hudson. We will be here keeping you through the storm and being sure that we have as much information to be able to present to you as we can. So again, be sure to follow us on all social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're also on YouTube. We're on Reddit and SoundCloud too, so find us there as well. I have been meteorologist Mike Linden. I will catch you in the next update. Until then, stay safe.